Hi, and welcome to the ZP Vlog and Podcast. We like to do this vlog and podcast once a week, and it's really just a wrap up from the news from ZP for this week. I mean, at ZP, there's a lot of sort of technical and obviously commercial activity, and during the week there'll be sort of scientific discussion and scientific output, and we do like to sort of report on that during the week. Now, this morning, I think it may have even been last night actually, there was a webinar, and every week we do like to do a webinar and basically answer technical questions that have come in during the week. So the webinar this week, we touched on doing arterial blood analysis, and we did touch on RTX, which is a vanillinoid. It has this vanillin group in it, and at ZP we're very good at doing chemical analysis and also recognition of what the chemical is and how much there actually is of that chemical. And that was something that we did touch upon this week in the webinar. Also, lastly, I think we went a little bit quick through it in the webinar, but we did touch upon the need for good connections when doing electrochemical impedance analysis. So when you're doing EIS, it's a very sensitive technique, but it's both sensitive to the kind of electrochemistry or chemistry that's going on, but it's also sensitive to the electrical connection that somebody has. So we did make a point this week in our webinar of actually trying to emphasize that electrical connection is a sort of an important parameter. So let me just but I will return to those things in a short while. Now, there's no denying it at ZP at the moment that we are quite intense on our food sense generation 4. I mean, our food sense generation 4 is, by its name, is something that's been really refined over the years. And at this point now, it's a sort of, I use it practically daily, obviously, and I'm always delighted with its robustness, the way it sort of essentially functions, and we can actually handle really kind of complex samples. So this week, we did do our sort of usual webinar, but on food sense, that is. But one of the things we did touch upon is the testing of pure capsaicin. We have clients, and they like to use the food sense for measuring chili powder, chili sauces, etc. But one guy was asking, well, he was going to test it with capsaicin, and we have actually, I should say, rather tested it with capsaicin. So when people say, "Oh, I'm going to test it with capsaicin, make sure how it works," it's like, well, actually, we already have, and I'm able to essentially give the data, or at least display the data, so that this kind of concern whether this thing functions or not. We've both tested it in samples, chili powders, chili sauces, but we've actually tested it also in capsaicin itself. So I was able to go through that data in quite some detail, and sort of it just shows you how much verification that we've actually done at ZP to make sure that obviously that it functions the way it's meant to function. I think there's something quite nice about food sense as well. We were supporting a client this week, and they were actually going to test whole chilies, but I was able to sort of say to these people as well, and we did them an online support as well. Look, actually, when you're testing whole chilies, you're really talking about testing purees. A puree, obviously, for us is you kind of take the chili, you chop it up, you make it quite fine, and then you can extract it with the buffer, and then you can test it on the food sense generation 4 and get the Scoville heat unit. So I was able to train somebody face to face this week online, and we actually also were able to sort of make a video about the fact that you can test chilies by making them into a puree, and actually puree itself is something that some people actually want to test anyway. We've got some clients, a lot of clients are actually in places like Indonesia. So from Indonesia, we did have some requests come through on food sense generation 4. They wanted to know, can you test oils? And I think this is a real reflection of the robustness of electrochemical sensing, because actually we can test oils. Electrochemical analysis, which is what the food sense generation 4 is using, is really good with complex samples. I think so many analytical techniques that people use or develop actually require very well worked up purified samples, but food sense generation 4 is using electrochemical techniques, and these techniques don't really mind too much the let's say quality of the sample, or even the lack of preparation on that sample that we actually do. So I was able to take an oil, I did what's called a 1 in 100 dilution. I was able to vortex it. The vortexing is really the key because it creates such a fine emulsion of that oil within the buffer that we are able to actually extract the capsaicin, and we were able to actually get a very strong signal and a nice result on it. It's kind of crazy, I say crazy, it's a strong term, but it's kind of interesting how the complex some of these samples actually can be that we're challenged with. So I was also contacted this week by somebody who wanted to measure the hotness of chili honey. And can you imagine how viscous chili honey actually is? But we sourced the chili honey. It's very tasty, by the way. And I went through the ingredients, but I also then did a quick video on this where we actually took 0.1 grams of the chili honey and put it in 0.9 milliliters of buffer. So that's kind of a 1 in 10 dilution. But honey is actually fairly soluble, actually. I think there's a lot of sugars in it, so it does solubilize. And I felt that honey wasn't that hot. And I suppose to prove that point, actually, I did give one of my children this evening, and they said no, it wasn't that hot. So we were measuring it. It was kind of like 1,000 Scoville heat units, so it wasn't that particularly hot. And it just says that people would be kind of surprised that you could actually test the honey, but with our Food Sense Generation 4 and the sort of sample preparation techniques that we've developed over the years, then you actually could test it. Something I was super interested in was we had a nice inquiry this week. I'm still trying to get my head around the pronunciation of this. Resiniferatoxin. I'm sure I'm not quite getting the pronunciation of this correct, but it's a really interesting molecule. It's got this kind of reputation for being much hotter than capsaicin. So capsaicin is that molecule in chilies that gives chilies their intense heat, and this resiniferatoxin, RTX, is actually considered even more intense. And I can see what's going on here. There's this group called the vanillin group. I'm still not pronouncing that correctly, but there's this group that wants to dock to the receptors in your in your taste sort of system, and the rest of this molecule, this RTX, is actually very organic in nature, and I think that's what actually maybe helps it be more intense, because it's basically probably binds to those receptors quite strongly. So we did get a request in saying, can you detect this molecule? And I did a quick video and a kind of quick demonstration how we would go about doing it. But I felt that the quick answer was actually we could detect this molecule, and the reason I was kind of confident was because it's in some ways it's so similar to capsaicin that all the technologies that we developed over the years could actually be quite quickly moved over to this molecule. And that kind of then sort of broadens up the entire conversation a bit, because actually there's a whole series of molecules called the vanilloids, which have this vanillal group, and I would say RTX is one of them. I would say capsaicin is one of them. There's also gingerol, which is also a sort of pungency molecule, and curcumin. I think it's in turmeric you have a molecule called curcumin. So all these molecules all have this vanillal group, and actually all of them are actually addressable by our technologies. We would have to develop new assays and sort of potentially new buffers, but the platform as such can actually detect these things. And then the last, but no least interesting inquiry this week is somebody was wanting to do arterial blood gas analysis. Interesting application. We do like point of care, and in the end, sort of able to say, look, people can buy our sensors and get on with it. They can use our electronics and get on with it. Or actually, their quickest route to having something that's useful is actually use the Sense-it-all platform. The difference between Sense-it-all and Food Sense is just Sense-it-all is a platform, and Food Sense is really an application of it. But we have a technology platform at ZP that if somebody has a vision as to an unmet market with an unmet analyte, they could very quickly jump onto this platform and actually have a minimally viable prototype done really quickly. So I'm kind of I don't want to say super pleased, but I am definitely super happy with the Sense-it-all platform and our ability to turn really ideas into tangible products really quickly. Now we do have something like 3 webinars next week. In total 6 of them, because we do 2 on every day. There's one on food sense, there's one on wearables, and there's one on Sense It All, which could be used in point of care, point of need analysis. So please watch out for those webinars. At the same time, if you've got any questions of ZP, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. But otherwise, it's been a busy week. I know it was very capsaicin centric this week. But I'm sure we'll get some more technical questions in that will kind of we'll mix this up a little bit more. But any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Okay, thanks very much and have a good week. Take care. Bye bye.